problems with leaves. So somebody had, say some people could spend just about 10 days on the ride. So our stoppages were very calibrated, like one day here, point A, one day, point B, one day. So it was more about riding than, interacting with local people or imbibing local cultures and interacting with locals. So that didn't really, although I wanted to write about it, but I didn't really have enough matter that I could really write about, because I honestly didn't have that much of interaction. So when I finally left that group in 2008 and I decided to go solo in 2013, was that when I found I have the extremely enriching experience. And I did not take normally if you go to Ladakh from Delhi, you take the Jammu-Srinagar highway and then go. So I decided to take an alternative route, which is through the Mughal road, from Rajouri to Shopia and then Srinagar and then Leh and all. So that, and then onwards to Turtuk, which is the last Indian village in the extreme north. So that trip was so enriching. I thought, why not write about it? But even then, before I sat for that trip, how Battlefields in Paradise came to be written was also quite interesting. In the sense, I was sometime in April of 2013. I was driving my wife to her office. So suddenly a schoolboy on a bicycle, he is riding down on the wrong side of the road, and then he crosses diagonally, almost comes in front of my car. So I swerved not to hit him. And I just told my wife, this is what happens when common sense takes leave. So she said, that's such a wonderful phrase you used to describe something. So why don't you write a book? I said, the book I want to write, you won't let me write, because I have to go solo and you are against me writing solo. So then on the spur of the moment, she said, no, you go, I won't stop you. So which is how I went.
And then decided. So when you got into Ladakh, did you feel that you were going to write about it, or it just came off the trip, and at the end of it, then you decided that, okay?
No, not at the end of it. I think I made the decision somewhere in the middle of it. When I was traveling from Srinagar to Leh, and I got caught in a massive in torrential rain. I was drenched to the skin. I was shivering like a leaf in a tree, and then I took shelter in a small hotel where the tea shop owner was very kind enough to serve me some really warm, hot meals. Then he took off my gloves and says, let me dry it for you. So he put it on he had a huge stove run by fire, fueled by firewood. He dried my gloves. He gave me my dry gloves back in the rain and all. So, and I thought the hospitality, a totally unknown person, helping me out so much. And then it has happened. Along the route, I have met some such people. So then I thought, okay, I better write about it.
So essentially, when you were 48 when you decided to take that trip, and so you went to Ladakh, and what you met there, and you were a journalist then. Was it really what's happening on the ground? Was it real, or was our reportage not really nice enough?
I did find differences, not as much in Ladakh as in Kashmir, because when I was planning the trip, I was warned, don't go. Many of my well-wishers said, don't go. It's a dangerous place to go, and certainly not alone. If something happens to you, it will be very difficult for your family and all. But then I thought, no, let me find out firsthand. I mean, I'm a journalist myself. There are other journalists who are reporting from Kashmir and all. So I went, and I did find a difference in the sense that things were not as bad as I thought when I was reading the newspaper reports or watching television. I mean, it's not that somebody was just waiting to ambush you or kidnap you. No, there was nothing like that. I mean, there was security. I got frisked at a lot of checkpoints. But that was that. And then during the Northeast ride, when I was, the day I crossed over to Myanmar for a short while. And on the way back, I stopped at a restaurant in Moreh. So I had lunch. Then I chatted up the restaurant owner when I went to pay him. And he told me something 6 years ago, which now looks like he had so much of foresight. He said, you know, I asked him about, because there's heavy security deployment in Moreh. So I was asking him about security deployment. He said, you know, insurgency is not as much a problem in Manipur as the question of ethnic undercurrents. And he told me, and I've written in my book, he told me, so, I mean, as if he saw the future. He said, you know, once trouble starts, army flag marches won't calm down the situation. The government needs to do something before it blows up. And 6 years on, I mean, whatever he said sounds so true now. What struck me was that 6 years ago, we wouldn't have read much in newspapers or heard in any other news that Manipur is sitting on a powder keg of sorts. Most media reports were talking about the massive infrastructure drive going on in Manipur, roads, bridges, railheads, and all those are good. We need development, but it beats me that how did we as journalists 6 years ago missed these warning signs that something, some big trouble could happen.
Bad was happening. So, if you look at it, Manipur, obviously, Meghalaya, since you focused a lot, what did you see about Meghalaya?
Frankly, I loved Meghalaya. Starting from the ride from Guwahati, and I did mention in the book that I think it's one of the best, at least in 2018, it was one of the best roads to ride. I mean, it's a motorcyclist's delight. You twist and turn and enough open stretches to speed up and all those things. I loved the hospitality everywhere that I went it started with the guest house owner in Sora. And frankly, I didn't know Cherrapunji was largely called Sora now. So I kept looking for, when I was entering Shillong, I was looking for signages for Cherrapunji. I did not see any. I kept seeing Sora. So I finally stopped somewhere and asked. She said, oh, Cherrapunji's name has changed to Sora. So that's how I find out. Now, this guest house where I stayed, I mean, I'll never forget his hospitality in the sense, the day I was leaving, I had to leave early morning for Dauki. So this young man who was running the guest house, he told me that he would be leaving at night because he wasn't staying in the guest house. He has a house nearby, so he just goes and sleeps the night there. So I was making the payment. That time he didn't have UPI. So, and he didn't have change. He said, I can't pay you back 200 rupees, whatever was the difference. So he let me go off without paying 800 rupees because I told him that 1 month later I'm coming back with my wife and kid, which I did. So, I mean, he was a total stranger. He trusted me. He said, okay, when you come back next time, you make the payment. I did that, but I can't imagine somebody else it happening in some other parts of the country who would let me go without paying him 800 rupees.
So that was one of your best experiences.
Yeah. Then I also had this long meeting with Lou Majo in Shillong. I had asked him for 20 minutes. I ended up speaking to him for 90 minutes. Enthralling. I mean, I just loved that conversation. It just went on and on and on. I mean, he also didn't realize time was running out. It was a great time. I had a lovely time riding to Dauki, then to Phnom Penh.
So tell me something. You're 52 now.
Was when I started that road in 2018. I was 53.
Is motorcycling actually on a Royal Enfield? Isn't it a bit of a challenge for like a person of that
my age?
Yeah.
Depends. I mean, if you are physically fit, that shouldn't be a problem. But there have been times when I wish I was younger, particularly in 2018 during the ride from. I was traveling from Teju to Walong in Arunachal. I was headed for India's two easternmost villages, Kibitu and Kaho. Now, much of the road from Walong to from Teju to Walong was atrocious. I mean, there was virtually no road for much of the distance, and it was just rocks, more rocks, and water crossings, and they had scrapped out the mountains to build a new road or widen the road. Red soil, slippery, watery. And then, Royal Enfield had a very good tag for the Himalayan. It said, built for all roads, built for no roads. So that tag really, the bike really lived up to that tag, carried me through. But I did end up riding at night, which I really hate. So in those kind of situations, I really wished I was younger. But I mean, and stretches from Imphal to Kohima, stretches of that highway was also terrible. And then from Kohima to Wokha, they were laying new roads. So it was just full of rocks and more rocks as far as you can see. So, yeah, it was...
So, Sabir, like as a journalist, then you're riding a bike, you're traveling the country, you're seeing most of the country in its completely pristine sense. Any of it that we reported as journalists, was it real, that's happening on the ground that you see? Like, for instance, Ladakh, Kashmir, whatever was reported in mainstream media, was it really happening, or was it just a facade?
No, it was largely happening, but what happened was sometimes like I said about Manipur, where we missed warning signs of reporting. I mean, I think we should have, as journalists, people should have reported. Then there's a danger ahead, which we missed. But largely what happens was reportage of what has happened is more or less okay. I mean, what has happened, you can't change it. But to put things in perspective, or what it could mean in the future, what ramifications such kind of events would have, I think that point has largely been missed, whether it was in Kashmir or in the Northeast. Like I'll tell you one thing, in Nagaland I met a group of people in Okha. I just finished lunch, I was going out towards Mokokchung. That's casual conversation, which very aware youngsters, and they were pretty miffed that the government's, the center's push for an agreement with the NSCN hasn't yet, come to a final stage. And they were very aware. They said, see, if this government is just trying to mollify Nagas with this kind of thing, sort of carrot and stick policy, or not even a carrot and stick policy. It's like like trying to put up a pretense that it wants peace, but hasn't been able to stitch together a final agreement. He said, no, that could be dangerous. And if you see, I mean, I think earlier, I think last week, there's this interview of NSCN chief Muiva saying, is it Muiva? Yeah, I think it was Muiva. Was saying, who's warning that NSCN could break the ceasefire once again.
Yeah, that was last week. So tell me something, Sabir. A lot of young kids here. And I don't know for what reason, but Royal Enfield is quite a favorite here in Shillong.
Yeah, I have seen
I can see all of them Royal Enfields, all
yeah.
different types of variants.
Yes.
How difficult is it to ride and then ride a journey and write about the journey?
And that bike is a very user-friendly bike. So, and modern Royal Enfields are much better than what they used to make, say, 15, 20 years ago. Very good quality build. They take you through thick and thin. That's the hardware part of it. Now, when you write a book about travel, I mean, what happens is you have a blueprint. You have something in your mind. Okay, I will travel from point A to B, and then to C and D. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll meet so-and-so, and then I'll write. You don't have to think about, not like fiction that you have to conjure up a plot to keep readers hooked. So by the time you finish a ride, you already have the experience, you have to write. But what happens is, even if you plan a ride and you plan your itinerary of what you'd want to ride, sometimes say you have planned to meet somebody in a particular place, a local person of importance. So when you reach that place, he may not be there, he or she may not be there for some whatever reasons. You may want to visit a place, and then you find out at the last moment that you were not allowed to visit. It happened with me when I was in Arunachal Pradesh. I crossed Jairampur. I was heading to see the Pangu. I was heading to the Pangu Pass in the India-Myanmar border. So I had to take a pass from Jairampur, in Jairampur, from either the army or the, I think there's this SDO there. But the Assam Rifles told me, if the civil officer gives you one, we'll give you one. Then I went to check with him. So he says, sorry, there's a change in protocol. We have orders from the center that outsiders are not allowed now to go to Pangu. So that was a big disappointment. So that is those things you have to keep in mind, somebody, if you're planning to write a travel book.
Yeah. So does this become a bit of a challenge for you when you're trying to figure out and how to conceptualize and put it into words? And then these challenges, how much did they actually impede you?
Depends on at what stage you face these challenges. In my case, like this Pangu Pass thing happened when I was in the middle of the trip. So then I had enough, because I still had enough distance to cover. I still had enough places to see. So I could make up for that, for missing Pangu and not able to see the other side of Myanmar on that side. So I made for that shortcoming or my misfortune by doing the trip to More and then crossing over to Myanmar. So if I was lucky in that way, otherwise I think you have to make the best with what you've got to write about.
And when you finished your trip, what was your bestest takeaway that you had from Ladakh as well as from here? Then as a journalist, because you were a journalist when you started, you were a journalist when you took that ride, you were a journalist when you said, I'll cross I'll go to Ladakh before I touch 50. So obviously, you took that ride and the story unfolded, but what were your takeaways when you came to the Northeast into the East?
See, David, my takeaways are have been the wonderful memories that I have made, and that wonderful adventures I have had. I mean, it's like a different feeling when you suddenly find yourself get caught in either in torrential rain in a place like Sonamarg, it's bitterly cold, or you get caught in a snowstorm climbing Kardungla Pass, or you get trapped in some other place in Ladakh because of in Kashmir because of a landslide, and you are stranded until help arrives in the form of an outmover from the Border Road Organization to clear the mess before you can travel. And then the friendships that you forge, that you make. And I've discovered one thing, that if you're on a motorcycle, you make friends more easily than if you do if you're in a car. So,
Anyone here who likes to ride motorcycles? There's no riders.
So there's one there.
Oh, there's one there.
So, so the memories the memories are the best takeaways. You know, I met during Northeast ride, I met Tenzing Hillary's son in Darjeeling. Such a humble soul. He is an Everestier himself. The memories of meeting him, or meeting a steam train driver in Darjeeling. I met a 1962 veteran in Tawang. I went to Kiguama village in outside Kohima. I looked up the house where the Japanese general, commander, General Sato, during the Second World War stayed in the house. It is still there, still stands as it was. It's changed hands a few times. So this kind of memories, you know, they're going to last a lifetime, and no one can take them away from me. I mean, and the fact that I achieved what I wanted to do, whether it was on the right side of 50 or the wrong side of 50, I did what I wanted to do. So I have no regrets in my old age. That I won't have that regret in my old age, that I wanted to do something and I didn't do when I had the time.
Absolutely awesome. Are there any journalist students here, or writers, or anybody? If you would like to talk to Sabir. Sabir has been a very dear friend. He was with the Hindustan Times and we worked together. And he's traveled and he's used his passion for motorcycling to actually discover and to actually render knowledge. Because when I read chapter 10 of Sabir's book,
Into the East.
it was kind of into the East. It was kind of interesting. What he saw and what he described, it was just like you and me. It's not a journalistic parlance or anything. It's just you and me. If you guys want to read, or if there are anyone who wish to ask anything about his experience, especially the writer.
To ask that.
Anyone?
Hello. Yeah, it's just a general question because you've been traveling solo and especially in the Northeast, there's a lot of language barrier, right? So how did you face that and how did you navigate through that?
Frankly, I didn't find a language barrier. I mean, I speak Assamese. I understand a little bit of Bengali. I can speak a little bit of Bengali. So Hindi, English, of course, carried me through. I mean, you won't believe the kind of language issues I had was with people you wouldn't expect. I mean, I was stopped at a checkpost in Arunachal Pradesh. They were the Maratha Light Infantry people. The funny thing was, my motorcycle had a Tamil Nadu number plate, and this soldier from the Marathi Light Infantry, he was a Tamil. So the moment he saw my motorcycle, he started speaking to me in Tamil. Finally, I had to tell him, chill, bro, I'm not Tamil, I can't speak. So then the day I was riding into Shillong from Guwahati, I parked the bike outside the lake. What's that lake? Barapani. So the moment I stopped the bike, there were two other bikes behind me, much younger people, three people on two bikes. Though they come in and they go ahead and park somewhere else. So suddenly the youngest of the lot, they comes running to me. He says, sir, are you from Chennai? I said, no. Then I told him, you must be from Chennai. He said, yeah. So I saw your number plate, so I thought you must be from Chennai. So that's how, and of all places, in Imphal, I stopped to ask for a direction. Another Emeti person, he also asked me, are you from Chennai? He starts talking in Tamil. I said, how do you know Tamil? He said, no, I worked in Chennai for a few years. So I saw your number plate. I thought you were a Tamil. So that's how. I didn't have problem with it. Otherwise, speaking to locals around here. And no.
Hi, Sabir.
Hi.
Nabina here. I'm your
Yeah.
former colleague
Yes.
from the Sentinel.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so good to see you up on the
You
stage
too.
and talking about your book. When I knew you back then, and I keep telling my friends that I never thought that Sabir Hussain will be the biker type. I don't know what is the biker type, but at that time, you were talking about journalism students. At that time, I was a journalism intern, right? A very young person working for the Sentinel, and you were already there as a reporter. So now that I see this transformation, I'm curious, like what made you love this whole idea of travel? See, biker type I'm bringing in not just as a stereotype, that at a certain age, people or men like to, do it, as we see in so many countries around the world. But what brought you to the love of travel and document it? So what would you tell journalism students here? Consider me as the person from the past asking you. So just curious.
Navina, I had always loved traveling, but what really fired my imagination was, I think sometime in the late 80s, I was either in the last year of college or I had just passed or I must have just gotten into Sentinel. I read Vikram Seth's book, From Heaven Lake. I don't know if you have read it. It's a fabulous overland trip from China to Kathmandu before he takes the flight to Delhi. So that fired my imagination, So I always thought, okay, someday I'll also write a travel book. But frankly, at that time, I had no idea where I would travel, from where to where, and what would I write about, actually. So, and then when I became a journalist, of course, the idea of writing a book went into cold storage for quite some time because you know how it was like in journalism, and too hectic always. Then when I shifted to Delhi, it was even worse. A pressure cooker of an atmosphere in Press Trust of India or other places where I worked. So what happened, like I said earlier, I told David earlier, there was this motorcycle club which was looking for a person to fill up their group. So which is when it happened. I had always wanted to travel on a motorcycle. So when the opportunity came, I sort of grabbed it with both hands, and then I decided, okay, I went with Pathfinders for quite a few years, and then I decided, okay, it's better to ride solo, so you can stop wherever you want, you can see whatever you want to see, talk to whoever you want without having to wait for, worry about the rest of the gang or delaying the rest of the gang for riding. And as a writer, as a traveler and a writer, I make it a point that when I travel, I don't see myself as a tourist. I see myself as a traveler who I don't expect 5-star treatment everywhere where I stay. Not that I afford 5-star hotels, but I prefer to stay in more humble accommodation, in homestays. Like I told you about the Cherrapunji experience, I had wonderful homestay. In Kohima also I had wonderful relationships. But I try to imbibe the local culture, the local, the spirits of the people and all those things. Spend time with the people, so that sort of enriches your experience a lot, and they help you make memories. I mean, something, I could tell my grandchildren, okay, I did this, I met so-and-so someday when they all grow up.
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon, sir.
Please sit down, ma'am. Don't have to stand.
Okay, no problem, sir. I want to ask you one question because you are telling about traveling, etc. So I also very much fond of traveling. I have already traveled lots of countries in the world, but I want to know how will you define a traveler and tourist?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
See, I mean, I don't mean to offend anybody who calls himself or herself a tourist. I mean, I've been a tourist also a few times. But what happens is, when you are a tourist, you have an itinerary. You will go today you will see this and that and that and that. And you are in a rush to rush from point A to point B to point C. And end of the day, maybe by a bonfire by the hotel where you will be staying. And all things. It's a little different when you are a traveler. You can choose to do whatever you want with your time. Like in my case, the day I went to visit a veteran of the 1962 war in Tawang, I had to hunt for him. I overshot his house. Then somebody guided me back to his house and all. So I had planned to meet him for a short time, then come back to Tawang. He was living a little outside. I mean, he was living near the monastery, and I was staying in the town. So that meeting stretched quite a lot, and I had gone to see him late afternoon. By the time I left, it was evening. So because I saw myself as a traveler at that time, I didn't have to go to somewhere else, and I had set myself, okay, this is the man I need to talk to know his experiences of what it was like in 1962 under an occupation army, of what life was like, and when the Chinese moved into Tawang. Such a rich conversation I had with him. If you were a tourist, maybe you wouldn't have been able to spend that much of time because you would have something else to see up later in the day. So that's how I make the distinction.
Are there any further questions from the audience?
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask a question that what would you be the advice, what would you give advice to us youngsters, especially the female? Like, suppose I love traveling a lot, then what would you give advice for me to travel solo, or what are the precautions, or...
On a motorcycle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm really happy you asked me this question.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll just tell you what just follow your dreams, ride safe, stick to your and preferably try not to ride it after sunset, because it can get very tricky at sometimes if you get caught in a place where you are far from any kind of civilization, or maybe what happens is if you are in the outback, your nearest help will be maybe quite at some distance away. So try to make your journey from point A to point B, always between sunrise and sunset. Ride safely, be kind, be generous to others, respect local customs, and don't get mad at trivial if things go wrong with the locals, because who knows, they may be going through worse than you are. But yeah, if you follow your dreams, you will follow your heart, you will really enjoy your ride, and sometimes I can tell you from my experience that the sound of the motorcycle exhaust is the sweetest sound you will hear. And for me personally, long distance motorcycle has worked as a therapy. So I hope when you do it, it will work for you too.
This will be the last question for this session.
Good morning, sir. Another question that I had in mind was when you talked about your travels, how do you differentiate between writing as a journalist and writing for a book? Because there was one book that I read, The Motorcycle Diaries. I'm sure you've heard of the book by Che Guevara. So when I read the book, it felt like he was writing a book, but then his experience were very much from a journalist's point of view. I'm not really sure how he went about doing the book, but then from your experiences, how do you differentiate between writing as a journalist and writing for a book?
No, I don't focus much on being a journalist when I write a book. When I have written these two books, I use my journalistic knowledge to make the book more interesting with nuggets of information that normal people may not have. Like when I wrote wrote Battlefields and Paradise, I mentioned things like I was crossing Jozila Pass, and I mentioned that Jozila Pass was the site of the world's highest tank battle in 1948 when we drove out Pakistani intruders. I mean, not everybody would know about it. So things like that. And a place like Turtuk, which we wrested from Pakistan in 1971, many people would think it had always been a part of India, and that we didn't have to fight to take it back. So this kind of things. I mean, I try to put my journalistic instincts on the back burner. I write about my experiences. I use, as far as journalism is concerned, I use my knowledge to supplement when I'm writing about, when I mention ground situation in a particular area vis-a-vis what is being reported in the media and all those things. That's how I do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for our speakers? That was quite an exciting rendezvous. Thank you, Mr. Sabir and Ba David, for taking us on a journey.
Welcome.
Wherein the road was a very thrilling voyage into the heart of storytelling. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present the mementos to you.
Thank you.
Our speakers will now proceed to the book signing tent. If anyone has additional questions, you may ask them at the book signing. Once again, their words have illuminated the transformative power of travel, transcending borders and touching lives. We will now have a 2 minutes interval before we proceed to our next session. Thank you.
Don't you cry, just let go of your pain. And when you fall asleep, know tomorrow's a new day. Tonight I'm moving like just let go. Just let go. Just let go. Tonight I'm dancing like just let go. Just let go. Just let go.
gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be resuming shortly. If all of you can please proceed to your respective seats. We are just getting ready and we'll be welcoming the guests shortly to the stage. Thank you.
Fall on the window down the hall, and it becomes the morning dew. Darling, when the morning comes and I see the morning sun, I wanna be the one with you, just the two of us.
Hello, check.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I request you all to kindly return to your respective seats. We will be beginning the session now. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now immerse ourselves in a session that captures the essence of Meghalaya's rich oral traditions. The book in focus is titled Hayupyam Kabay, which is a lyrical Pnar phrase that beautifully translates to on mother's lap, evoking the warmth and intimacy of a mother's embrace. It is a compilation of 25 lullabies in varied dialects from the Khasi Jantia Hills, with illustrations for each song and musical notations for each tune. Funded by Samvad and published by Martin Luther Christian University Press, the book blends tradition and accessibility, aiming to revive and pass down these cherished folk songs. The author, Amabel Susni is one of Meghalaya's most talented singers and founder of Mokuri, a folk band committed to preserving and promoting Meghalaya's musical heritage. Currently, she works as a music educator at Hillcrest Higher Secondary School and is also pursuing her PhD at Martin Luther Christian University. She has received numerous accolades, including the Samvad Fellowship by Tata Steel Foundation, the Young Talented Artist Award by the Ministry of Culture, and the Inspiring Artist Award by the Meghalaya Grassroots Music Project. She is joined by Daryl Lingdo, a multifaceted artist, singer, multi-instrumentalist, and producer known for blending indigenous and modern music. With years of experience in Malaysia and Singapore, he has worked on acclaimed projects like the GT Experiment and Vital Signals. As a frontman of Blue Temptation and collaborator with various reputed bands, Daryl's work reflects a deep commitment to musical storytelling. Together, Amabel and Daryl will take us on a journey celebrating the power of musical literature as a bridge between generations, nurturing cultural roots and intimate bonds. Let's have a round of applause for Amabel Susni and Daryl Dingdo. I now leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful introduction. I feel so honored. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we start this session, I'd just like to introduce ourselves one more time. It's not every day that musicians and singers get to be on stage and not have to sing. You know, it's a very, very nice honor, but it's also a very scary one. Because let's say throughout a 1 hour set of songs that we usually do, we play, probably we only get to talk for like 5 minutes or less throughout the entire 1 hour. So getting to only talk with a little bit of singing is like a little bit of, you know, it's a bit of a change, a welcomed change, but it's a change nonetheless. So I hope you all will bear with us. If you have any questions, please do feel free to put your hands up during the entire conversation. If you feel, let's say, you can't understand what is being said, or you feel like you want to know more about what is being talked about, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll get to you. All right. And Amabel, obviously, her list of accolades and accomplishments speak for themselves. And I have a very, very deep respect for her, not only as a colleague, but also because she has, she is pursuing the knowledge of music in all its forms and what that means. And she's doing a really deep dive, especially with the music from here, for our local indigenous music, you know, because these are songs and these are lullabies that can only be passed on, that have only been passed on through, they've been passed on orally, right? So it's been grandmothers to mothers, mothers to daughters, daughters, so forth, you know. So, and if somebody along that chain, along that line, forgets or just doesn't take the time or the care to really, you know, remember or really pass it down again, then it gets lost. And that's culture that is being lost. And I have a deep respect for her for trying to keep all of that alive. And also because she is pursuing music as an educator. She's doing it like not just because she loves it, but because she has this yearning to find out more and to do more with it, and to probably help a lot more people with her art, with her talent. So yeah. So I would like to introduce the book, ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful, beautiful book of lullabies. And I was beating my head over, okay, how do I introduce this book? What do I say? I'm a singer. I could sing, but then I'm like, no, that wouldn't work. And then, as I was reading it, I was reading the whatever Amabel wrote herself, and I was like, you know what? I should just read this because it's precise. It says exactly what came from her, you know, what she was thinking, what went into this thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, Khasi lullabies mostly exist in oral form and as scattered remnants among the tribes. There is little documentation of the lyrics and music notations. This project aimed to revive this tradition by providing mothers and families with text and audio recordings so that this important part of family life can continue. Many Khasi families are using the Khasi language less in favor of the dominant languages used at school and work. While the lyrics of the lullabies are in Khasi dialects, there are English translations for parents to understand and explain the meaning to their children. This book is a compilation of 25 songs collected from different places in the Khasi and Jaintia hills of Meghalaya, translated from various Khasi dialects to English and notated using the Western music notation system. This bilingual book has song lyrics, illustrations for each song, and musical notations for each tune. The book aims to contribute to society as a teaching aid for schools and institutions for children to learn these songs of intimate attachment, which serve as a comforting bond between the child and the mother. With this book, we hope future generations will inherit the rich cultural heritage of folk songs by passing the music down from one generation to the next. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ha Yupiam Kabay, On Mother's Lap, A Jingroi Kin Oitia, by Amabel Susni. All right, see, that was like, wow. I couldn't have like framed things better myself. Anyways, so Amabel, good to be here with you.
Good to see you too,
See,
Darrell.
both of us are like nervous because we don't do this. But anyways, we're all going to help her through it, right? Yes, we are, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so tell us a little bit about growing up. Growing up here, the musical culture in the Khasi Hills is a rich one. It's a very rich one. I can personally like attest to like being here. The first memories I had was my mother cooking, like singing songs, humming old-timey tunes, and her rocking me to sleep, singing all of these songs. So tell us a little bit about your childhood. Like when did all of that start making sense to you? Like, there's music there. This is happening, tunes and stuff.
Okay, before I tell you the story, I'd like to thank you for that wonderful introduction about me. I wish I could say the same to you as well, if I had the time. Anyways, I am a very simple human being. I speak very simple English. I wish this conversation right now is in Punar, so I can express myself, very clearly, and whatever thoughts that I have in my mind. But anyways, I'll try my best.
The money come there.
And I'm really very nervous. Since morning, I woke up early in the morning and I couldn't, I can't stop thinking about this day. And it's truly an honor being in front of you, everyone. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And before I begin with your question, I'd like to sing because I need to calm a little bit down. Please allow me. This song that I'll be singing is a song that was sung to me by my grandmother when I was a child, and when she was still, fit and healthy that time. My grandmother passed away in the year 2014, and so she sang a song called Khonwa Maya, and before, at night, while she lulled me to sleep. So the next day in the morning, we have to go to the field, like a paddy field, and join my family members and everyone to work in the field. So the night before that, she sang this song to me, and this song is called Khonwa Maya. Just to brief about the song, Konwaya Wamaya means beloved child. It's in Pana dialect. And it talks about, it says, beloved child, my beloved child, it's time for you to sleep. When morning comes, we'll climb the grassy mounds and gaze the splendor of nature, the hills, the trees, the green pastures, the flying flocks on the sky. If by now you are not in bed, you cannot witness these. Along the way, the many flowers, the fruits and crops to pick, to lunch inside a tattered hut and fishing in from the field. Sleep now, be a good girl for night to quickly pass. When morning comes, we'll climb the grassy mounds and gaze the splendor of nature. And the song goes like this. She didn't sing like I did, by the way. It's very authentic with the style of her singing and all that, but I'll try my best to follow her footstep. All right, the song goes like this. Konwa maya akon yonga dato ipor uthia istep ukai chalung ulai yo yo imyat berthai kilum kideng ki plang yer ngam hasun waher kisim lam thia phi khon ini waro usa khite wamyo chalum ulai sentu bonjat kiso kijhur ukhet hatrap uchong porbam wasni do kemna hali thia no katu hamsi salon yo smart imit uche dang step ukai chalum ulai yo yo imyat berthai. Thank you. That was the song. Thank you, Daryl. And speaking about your question,
I totally forgot about the question once you started singing. Sorry. But anyways, yeah.
yeah, so everything, begins from the time when my grandmother was still alive, as I mentioned, and looking after me when my parents were not at home. She played a significant role in nurturing my love for singing. So I vividly remember her, singing traditional lullabies and folk songs, which sparked my curiosity and fascination with melodies. And growing up, music was always present in our household. Both my parents, they sing, and my grandmother, and I've heard so much about my grandfather as well. He sings a lot. And I recall spending so much time, growing up in a Christian family. I recall spending so much time in learning the Khasi hymn from the Khasi hymn book. And as I grew older, my interest in music evolved, and I began taking singing lessons. And all these helps me develop an appreciation for the art. And my musical journey was further shaped by experiences, right from singing in church, singing in community and school programs, participating in all those, and all those early experiences laid the foundation for my passion for singing. Yes.
Right. So church, basically, because I think it's the same with most of us here, especially in Shillong or in Meghalaya. Most of us started singing in church. I mean, it's the same with me. Like, we had special numbers, they'd call them, and then so you had to do that. And then that further developed into the church choir. If you were good enough, or then you were allowed to join the choir, and then that. So church is a very, very good thing. I also think being a Christian state, I think church has played a big role in, like, bringing up that passion for music in a lot of youngsters, in a lot of youth around. When I was growing up, anyways, like, I don't know about now. Maybe it's the same. I hope it's the same. But yeah, when I was growing up, that was the case. So would you say that was the time when you really started taking music seriously, like as a career? When you think, this could be something I could like do as as a life thing, as a career, to make money or to whatever. Was that when it started?
So yeah, I was able to draw inspiration from that as well. But taking music seriously, it was a pivotal moment in my life. For me, it began when I first participated in one of the competitions held in Jaintia Hills called The Voice of Jaintia, if you've ever heard of that. Yeah. So being among the talented contestants at that time, inspired me profoundly. And although I didn't reach the finals, finishing in the top 20, was a significant accomplishment at that time. And witnessing fellow contestants perform with so much passion opened my eyes and, opened my eyes to music as a viable career path. And their dedication and talent showed me that music could provide a livelihood. And following that experience, I started singing for various Jaintia films and participating in various programs in the community, in Jawai, and, in earning incomes from studio recordings as well. So all these opportunities, it solidified my resolve to pursue music seriously. And the exposure and inspiration I gained from the competition I mentioned, it transformed my hobby into a career aspiration. And that experience continued to drive my passion for singing, yes.
Right. So when you started like doing sessions and you started gigging and stuff like that, was being a teacher, a music teacher, something that you also looked at as like, because for me, I think being an educator, especially like in your field, like being a music educator is something, to me, it's something daunting, because I know I can do the things that I do, but I don't know if I can like teach someone else to do the things that I can do. It's a real thing. It's a real it's a real scare. So was that when you also like started, when it started creeping into your mind, okay, maybe I should give back a little bit, teaching and stuff like that, or did that come later?
Okay, so that one, I grew up in a family of teachers. My mother, she's a teacher, and my uncle, he passed away last year. He was a teacher as well. And even my grandfather, he died when I was not even born, but I've heard so much about him, his history, that he was really a great teacher. So, growing up in a family of teachers instilled in me a desire to teach. Yes. So both my uncle and my mother, like I said, are teachers, and I've heard so much about my grandfather. And initially I thought, when I got into the job, initially I thought like teaching will be very easy. It's an easy job to do. It's a straightforward job. But, I was thinking you just need to follow the book, give assignments and homework or classwork, and then just need to grade the students. But, reality proved me more challenging. So engaging with students required creativity, patience, and flexibility. And despite the challenges, I've grown to love my job as a teacher, as it allows me to share my passion with my students. And I've also come to realize that teaching music is not just about imparting knowledge. It's about inspiring creativity, building confidence, and fostering a lifelong appreciation for music as well, yes.
Right. That's true, because these are very vulnerable people in terms of they'll listen to something that, let's say, like you, an accomplished musician, educator, like they're bound to believe you and do whatever, you tell them to. So I think that's one of the scary things. And also patience, because I think we as musicians ourselves, we're so passionate about this that, sometimes we forget that, not everyone is as passionate, or not everyone is as easy to, pick up these things, and it gets a little bit, whoa, okay, maybe I should chill a little, in teaching. That's true. I guess you were groomed to teach, from a very young age by your entire family. Nice. Okay. In case you all don't know, Amabel is also one of the vocalists for an acclaimed band here from Shillong called Fourth Element. And
I was.
Yeah, you were. Yeah. So they've gone around. They've played various jazz festivals around the world, and so the one of the more accomplished bands. So what can you say is like the biggest thing? Do you like gigging more, like the performance aspect of the music, or does teaching give you like that? Which one gives you a little bit more of a rush or a high?
I think singing. Yes.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I thought teaching would be easy, but it's not easy. Sometimes, my students gave me the hardest time in the world. But singing, you just need to learn the song and sing your heart out. And you can express according to the songs that you sing. And I feel like I deliver better when I sing. Yes.
Right. So coming to that, right? Coming to the book, what made you decide, okay, you know what? Because you could have written, you're an accomplished music, you've gone to music school, you know all of this. Like, what made you choose lullabies as the subject of the book? Why not like a performance, like, a book showcasing like, performance and the ways to do it, the different ways, the different kinds of other things that involve music. Why lullabies in particular?
So I just to mention, I also have a band called Mokhuri. It's a traditional folk band, as mentioned by Kongleton in the start. So I think my musical journey, it inspired me to come up with this book on lullabies. And my fascination with traditional lullabies, it stems from my childhood memories, like I mentioned earlier. My parents and grandmother, would sing all these soothing songs, melodies to lull me to sleep. And those moments, it created an unbreakable bond, filling me with peace and calm. And as I grow older, I realized the significance of preserving this oral traditions. And with technology's rise, children now, as we can see, they spend more time accessing digital content indoor rather than, playing outside. And this shift threatens the passing down of traditional lullabies, folk songs, children's play songs, oral stories, from generation to generation. And I feel like if we don't take action, these cultural treasures will become extinct. Yes. And the timeless tradition of singing lullabies will disappear as well. So I chose to write about lullabies to document and preserve our cultural heritage, ensure the continuation of oral tradition, because all these are cultural treasures, and, share the emotional connection and bonding experience through lullabies, and to celebrate the beauty of traditional music as well. So by recording and sharing these songs, I hope to keep our traditional legacy alive and inspire future generation maybe to cherish and pass down our traditional lullabies.
Right. Yeah, I think you're like a superhero in a way. You know what I mean? Like, you see, there's this thing that's happening where even it's happening in my own home as well. Like my nephews, none of them speak English. Or speak Hasi. Sorry, they all speak in English. It's not that they don't know how to speak in Khasi, they just don't want to speak in Khasi. And that's a very scary thing. It's a very, very scary thing because that's the only way to identify us as Khasis, the language. Because we don't dress up in a traditional way every day and go out. Like, that's how you can identify a person wherever he's from. You identify a Nagamese person because he speaks Nagamese, right? Identify an Assamese because he speaks the language. Now, if we can't speak our own language, then we'll just be lost. We'll just be strays, Like, where do we belong? Who are we? I think that's the question that I think every young person should ask themselves. Who are we? Who are we? Not in terms, yes, my name is, and I live there, my age is this. No. Who are we? Where do we stand? Where are our roots planted? Right? Because our growth is the same as how a tree grows. It's the same thing, right? We need roots. If we don't plant our roots, we can't really grow properly, right? We'll just be like this everywhere. And as an indigenous people, that cannot happen because we are only part of a percentage of indigenous people around the world. And there is nobody else like us. Even though we share similar traditions and with different other cultures, there's nobody else like us. And if we don't keep that alive, then I think it's a dangerous thing, like you were saying, right? So coming to like challenges that we face, right? What was the biggest challenge for you in compiling this book of lullabies? Because you had to go and meet different people from different villages and, different cultures even. So what was the most challenging for you?
Okay. So the most challenging part for me is that, at first, when I think about lullabies, I thought it'll be easy to achieve, to collect 25 songs. I never thought it'll be very difficult. But, when I got into the work and going into the field, I realized that it's not easy at all. Because approaching parents who don't understand the importance of this oral tradition, and also meeting people who don't even sing the lullabies anymore, it's really very difficult. And there was also a point where I met few people, and they promised to provide all the documents to me. But when we meet, they were able to sing only a line or two of the lullabies, and some of them don't even remember the lyrics. And to come up with a book, you cannot just collect just a line or two of the song. It should look proper, right? So that was the most difficult part of the project, yes.
So how did you go about solving those problems? Like you said,
yes.
Like some only remember two lines or a line or something. So how did you solve that problem?
So I was able to solve the problem by seeking help from some of the folk artists, folk musicians, and I also learned that parents sing different words of the lullabies. The tune can be the same, but the words, it depends on the situation. If it's a sad situation, different words, different lyrics will come out. And if it's a happy situation also, different lyrics and different, based on that situation. So that's how I was able to solve, I was able to shape some of the songs and in such a way. So it's easy to sing and easy to follow, yes.
Right. Nice. Because, as you were mentioning, our culture is that these lullabies, they also serve as a way of imparting generational lessons and morals from mother to child, and stuff like that, like just how to be, how to act, how to grow up to be a respectable person, or how to respect others, how to look at nature, to seek something that's deeper within us. And these, I saw a lot of these patterns in your book as well. Like for example, like in the lullaby Ijonga, right? Ijonga, like the last verse says something like, let's see. Yeah, Ijonga. So the last verse in Khasi, I'll say it in Khasi first because it's very poetic, it's very nice, and then I'll translate it to English. So the last verse says, Man kasngi pikala snotho yamaryang, simbaneng saudong ki her, snap ki survathyang, pisngau lingo pikmen la kirong, piru khon, shat penang roi ki surlajang. You know, so in English that means as you grow, you know the world around you. Listen to the birds sweetly chirping. In amazement, you will see their many colors. My child, you also sing and dance to your own tunes. So this is, it's a very nice way of saying, like, find your identity, son. Like, don't just listen to, like, you know, don't just follow the crowd. As I have this saying that I always like to say to people, only dead fishes go with the flow. When somebody says, just go with the flow, bro, I say, no. Only dead fishes go with the flow. If you're still alive, you swim, right? You find something else. So stuff like that. It imparts knowledge. It imparts wisdom. Like, it also asks you to, like, look at nature, because we're all growing together. We're all growing simultaneously, right? You can see examples from nature about stuff deep within yourself, right? And also in the song Usyar, right? Usyar, it teaches discipline, right? It teaches you to sleep early, to wake up early, right? And then during the day, when you're awake, to go out and work and toil and do all of the things that will bring you a good life, right? And with this particular song, Usyar, also in our indigenous faith, you know, Usyar is the one that brought the world out of darkness, you know. So it's also that there's a godly thing that's happening with these songs as well from Mother, you know, teaching you, because discipline is next to godliness, right? You can't be disciplined and be like spiritual or be stuff like that, right? So all of these things, I think, like you were saying, it's a very good thing, because this is our culture. This is what it is, and it teaches through these lullabies, and you know, that's how kids grow up, because nowadays kids don't grow up with these types of lessons or morals. Like you were saying, like everyone is on, like, listening to something from the West or some other lullabies from the West that don't necessarily teach kids the same thing, but they teach them other things which are also needed. But then these, I think, are more important, right, in terms of how you grow up and how you perceive the world and how you perceive people and each other, right? And yeah, so again, talk about, like, a little bit of the influences of Western media, right? And how these kids are not like listening to most of our traditional lullabies, right? But they're listening to other things that are more, like, dominant nowadays, right? And yeah, so just what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
So if we look at foreign influence, streaming sites have brought, you know, so much influence. I agree, but I also see this as an opportunity for cultural exchange. So our traditional songs and stories can teach people about heritage, show how different cultures share common human experiences. For example, the lullabies as well. I believe the entire world are singing lullabies to their children at one point of time. So, you know, by sharing our culture-based lullabies, we can promote understanding and empathy, preserve our traditions in the digital age, and enrich global music and storytelling. And, you know, today's youth are drifting away from their cultural heritage due to various factors, I'd say. Globalization and digitalization, like I mentioned, have made international, you know, content easier, accessible, often overshadowing local traditions and culture. And changing lifestyle also led to busy schedule that leaves very little time for our cultural practices, and also lack of exposure to our cultural heritage in schools, in homes, and and even more concerning is the decline of our native language as well. So language that we once spoken fluently, like you mentioned earlier, at home is now rarely spoken. Yeah, and English has become the dominant language in many households, as we can see. And this creates a barrier, I would say, between generations. Elders who are often, the keepers of cultural heritage struggles to communicate with younger family members who prefer to speak in English. Yes. So to counter this trend, I think a simple action can be taken, can be done, like speaking our mother tongue at homes and singing traditional songs like lullabies, and sharing stories and cooking traditional meals. All these, I believe, can help pass down the cultural values. Yes.
Right. And yeah, so coming back to the book, there are certain things that I also noticed, like you were saying earlier, how when you couldn't get the song, some of the songs, only 2 lines and stuff like that. So because they're all different, right, depending from one household to the other, one culture to the other. And I noticed also in some of your lullabies, because I remember clearly growing up, there were 2 kinds of lullabies that Khasi mothers would sing to their infants. One was a very nice, sweet, rocking, gentle, like, I love you, my dear child. Like the first song that Amabel sang when we started the discussion. It's very gentle, it's soothing. It says, my beloved child, time to sleep, I love you, whatever. And then there's another kind that is not so gentle. Some that, speak of, go to sleep, my child, or the big bad wolf will come and eat you and take you away. Or, like, it's a thing. So if, I don't know how many of you remember, but that's how, like, these lullabies would go. If it was a day when you were being naughty, it was the harsh kind of lullaby that would come to rock you to sleep. If it was a day when mother was feeling very nice also and you weren't being such a nuisance, she would rock you to sleep peacefully with one of these soothing songs, right? So, yeah. So how important do you think, teaching like traditional songs, right? In schools, or let's say in schools and colleges, even in like preschools, like kids, how important do you think it is? And do you think there is a way where we can like get these things in like the curriculums for schools, for most schools, to curb this, this thing where they've forgotten, like to curb this thing where their language won't be forgotten or their traditions won't be forgotten?
So, to me, personally, lullabies are more than just soothing songs, and they are, like I mentioned, cultural treasures, and are, a very important part of our cultural identity as well. So they contain stories, wisdom, and traditions that have been passed down through generations, and their loss would be a significant cultural tragedy, I'd say. And, it's open to everyone. This book, anyone can buy it, anyone can sing, anyone can, parents, young parents, I would urge each and every one of you to please buy this book in order to preserve our cultural, rich cultural heritage. Please buy this book and sing the songs to your children. You can also, you don't need to worry about the notations that are on the book. You can play the song from your mobile phones as well. For each and every page, there is a QR code, as you can see, and you can just scan the QR code and make your children listen to this song, or maybe you can also help teach your children. And I also, as I've already mentioned in the book as well, that this book can also be used in schools and institutions. So that way we can promote our traditional cultural heritage of lullabies, singing lullabies, yes.
So anyone who is in the education sector, ladies and gentlemen. I urge you to please. I think it's high time, because we are also seeing a decline, and it's very clear, it's very prevalent in Shillong, as it is probably everywhere else in India. We need something that is really solid, that really works, so that we don't lose, like you said, these cultural treasures, and so that our kids, our future generations know our culture, and they don't have to go and look for an older person or their grandfathers, their grandmothers, to ask them about their own identity, about their own culture. You know, I think it starts when, like, you know, they're young. That's the best way to teach people, right? When they're kids, when they're infants. Like, you teach them small things, like how most of us have been taught. Like, I would say I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it wasn't for my grandmother and my mother and my sisters, you know, making sure that I keep that part of my identity alive, that culture alive, you know. So, and now it's also up to me, for myself, to keep it alive, you know, to keep on, not just to keep it alive, but also to spread it to other people who may also be looking for a way to do the same, right? And I don't know if this is like a setting up from the universe, or if this is just some divine thing, but I'm honored and I'm so happy to be here, like having this, specifically this panel discussion about lullabies, because I'm also an expecting father. So I've been very afraid of, like, you know, just thinking about how my son or my daughter grew up in this world, and how I can, you know, do the best that I can so that stuff like this does not happen, like, you know. So, ladies and gentlemen, you should all get a copy. Even if you, like Amabel said, even if you don't speak Khasi, there are English translations, and there are also Western notations. So she has transcribed everything to Western notations. So if you want to play them on your instrument, you want to sing them, if you know how to read music, to sight read music, then you can easily sing them without having to scan the QR code. So Amabel, thank you so much. If there are any questions, anyone, we don't have a lot of time for questions, maybe 2 questions. If anyone has any. Any questions? No hands? One question.
Can you hear me? Yes. Firstly, congratulations, Amabel and Daryl.
Thank you.
We have been talking about the reach of the vernaculars, or you may say the other languages other than Hindi and English, because English has become official lingua franca, and franca lingua, and Hindi is in the spoken world. It is not easy, because you can see the crowd over here as to how much of the crowd of local dialect is over here. So it's not that easy, but at the same time, we have to encourage and conduct such programs at the lower level. So this is my suggestion, that if we want to penetrate into the mass, then it will be better that we further continue such programs at even lower levels. So that's what I wanted to convey. But congratulations.
Thank you so much. That's a very good point that you made, sir. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, it's not a question as such. I came in a little later. I'm so excited about this book, and thank you, Amabel, for writing
Thank you,
it. I wanted to ask, I don't know if you have done this already, but could you maybe read a little bit of it, if you haven't? Your favorite part of the book? A lullaby.
Can you read? Would you like her to sing it instead, because she has an amazing voice?
Yes, please. That would be lovely. We didn't hear enough of you, I feel, at this session.
So there's another lullaby which is very close to my heart. It is not collected from my place, but it's collected from Ribohoi district. It's called Yam Wat Yam, which means do not cry. And it's a lullaby sung by an elder sibling babysitting her younger sibling, and while the parents were out in the field. And the song goes like this. Yam wat yam ere se pun kabay nang lay shut do lun yo wan lam ka hai shi bun yam wat yam ere se nya upa nang lay ti so la yo ya bam I barakena. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Amabel Susni. Hayupiam Kabay is the book if you want to get it.
And also it's only 600 rupees. You can get it from one of the stalls over here by Martin Luther Christian University Press. And there will also be some percentage of discount if you'd like to buy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of the weekend.
What an insightful and fun session that was. As a fellow Pnar, I have to say, this now sok video jing klam or jing roik and oi young p. I am sure the audience will also agree with me when I say that the performance of her lullaby transported each of us to another dimension altogether. Let's have another round of applause for Amabel and Daryl. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present our talented speakers with a few mementos. Thank you for weaving a beautiful tapestry of sound and tradition that brought the rich oral heritage of Meghalaya to life. Your artistry has not only shared the lullabies of the past, but has also given them a new voice for the future. Thank you. Our speakers will now proceed to the book signing area, and we will be having our next session shortly. Thank you.
Let's talk it out. Let's talk it out. I'll always be open. When I step in the room, but you're not that kind of person I assume. If you don't know, they don't know, and I'm out of know. Let's talk it out. Let's talk it out. So many things I can say. One moment I just can't breathe. So I don't know.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be starting with the next session. If we can all please take our respective seats. It just came to my realization that after a very insightful session on melodies, now we'll be having a very interesting session, but in the world of thrillers. And I'm particularly interested in this one as well. And for our next session this afternoon, it explores a thrilling tale of underworld crime and corruption. But first of all, can I please have Mr. Rupam Kapoor as well as Ma'am Richa Kulkarni to please proceed to the stage. Yeah. For this session this afternoon, it will be a discussion for the next 30 minutes on the underworld crime of corruption, on the underworld with regards to crime and corruption, set in the gritty world of customs enforcement and smuggling. Through a compelling lens, it examines not only the fight against organized crime, but also the moral dilemmas faced by those on the front lines, told through the eyes of a young customs officer. For this session, we are graced by Rupam Kapoor, who is an author and a senior officer in customs and indirect taxes in the Indian Revenue Services. With a strong academic background in English literature, having completed his graduation and post-graduation at Delhi University, Mr. Rupam Kapoor combines his literary passion with a career in the civil service. And in conversation, we are joined by a young civil servant, a former Indian Revenue Service officer of the 2021 batch, and presently an IAS officer of the 2023 Assam Meghalaya cadre, streamlining this discussion on the world of facts, fictions, and thrillers. Let us have a round of applause for Mr. Rupam Kapoor and Ms. Richa Kulkarni. The floor is yours, sir, for the next half an hour. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I hope all of you are enjoying the session so far as much as I have. As our host said, it has been a very interesting journey. We had a travelogue, then we had a very lyrical discussion on indigenous lullabies, and now we are on to a crime thriller. So once more, I would like to welcome Rupam sir to Shillong and to this session. Right. So sir has already been introduced. I would just like to add that sir is also a postgraduate in English literature from Hindu College, University of Delhi. And he's worked in a diverse range of positions in the course of his career, of course, particularly in anti-smuggling formations and tax enforcement wings. Sir retired this year, and Hour of the Hounds is his debut novel, and I'm sure more are soon to come. Now, the novel, of course, is set in the early 1990s, as was introduced, based on the exploits of Prakash, a rookie customs officer who sets out to dismantle the world of smuggling, particularly drug smuggling, in the underworld, and in doing so, challenges the biggest dawn of the underworld. Now, what happens after that in this novel, which is set on the western coastline of India, where Sir has spent a lot of time working, is that he ventures deeper and deeper into this world of crime and smuggling. And as he sets out to discover the complex relations and interests that inhabit this world, and as he understands the complexity of the ecosystem that he is trying to dismantle, so does the reader. We'll discuss specific aspects of the book in a few minutes, but now we'll move on to our questions. So, firstly, sir, I think Facts and Fiction is a very apt title for this book, because while reading, the main question that the reader is left with is how much is fact and how much is fiction. Because, of course, Sir has been very ideally placed with an unprecedented level of access for any writer to have to the reality of these situations. So is the fact enhancing the fiction, or is it the other way around, sir?
Thank you, Richa, for the introduction. Thank you for the introduction. And as Richa said, what an interesting shift from a travelogue to lullabies and now to the world of chase. And I think the audience would really, really be challenged to have that shift of mood. But before I start answering your question on fact and fiction, I think I need to put a disclaimer. Whatever I say may not be the truth, may be the truth, but mainly because the protagonist has two girlfriends. And if I say it's all fact, then my wife is sitting out here. And it's going to be a very challenging session after this session itself to answer what exactly is the truth. But coming on a more serious note, Richa, when an author goes to tell a story, his primary aim is what Coleridge sometimes said for poetry, but it stands good for any author, which says that when you're reading a book, there should be a willing suspension of disbelief. Now, that willing suspension of disbelief essentially says that an author, when he's telling a story, the reader should believe in it. He should say, yeah, it's a credible story. It's a story which can be believed in. And while there have been authors who have, mainly sci-fi authors, of course, but sci-fi we don't believe in. But we have a range of authors who came up with absolutely imaginative stories from which at times challenged belief and still made you believe in them. Or you were totally engrossed in them. And they were those kind of thriller authors we had, the Ludlums of the world, or even a lot of them. Alistair MacLean. You read his book and you said, yeah, this is possible. Although at times you say, is it really credible? And when as a bureaucrat you write, and particularly when you have been pursuing a career which is not primarily literary, how do you go about it? How do you go about it? Because you can only write. You can't research as well. I think one of the leading bureaucrats who is now out with his 4th book recently said in an interview that I researched for my book across the country. I had Google. But I'm very sure that getting to the facts which you know make that story more credible. So to answer, part of it is certainly true, may not be, but these are the stories which we picked up when we were younger and we were working on the coast, on the western coast, with 6 of us who right from Bhuj going down till Mangalore. And we used to compare stories. We used to compare our activities. We used to compare what's happening on the coast. So they may not be stories. These are stories which have become legends in the Department of Customs. They have been carrying. But then stories standing by itself are only that. Those are facts without the embellishments. And unless you embellish it, what the authors or what the English literature or the teachers tell you to tell an interesting story is that somehow or the other you have to flesh out the characters, flesh out the characters, F-L-E-S-H out. You have to give them a certain character. You have to give them certain idiosyncrasies. You have to give them certain approach. How does he approach life? And for me, that was what makes a book intense. That is how intense author's feelings, the protagonist or the other participants in the novel, their intensity is. So yes, the 4 main movements of the book, which starts on the western coast in Dapoli, and then it goes across to partly in Jamnagar, it goes to Mumbai. Those events were certainly all true. May not be in totality as they were told, but they have all been embellished. They have all been embellished because, what we also call the new generation, that is a creative nonfiction. The creative nonfiction is, unless you may be telling a nonfiction, you may be telling a story, you may be telling fact, but unless you are able to embellish that fact, you can't tell a story which is interesting to the people. This is what has been done in this book. Certain facts have been taken. They have been embellished in a major way, particularly to ensure that they don't become just a narrative. I'll tell you a small one on this story. When I first started writing this book back in 2000, the stories were there. But day in and day out, as you would be doing now, we were reading files and making annotations and notings. and I wrote about 70 pages of it. And very proudly, I went and gave it to one of my seniors. Read it and tell me how good it is. And his wife came back. She says, it looks like a note sheet of a government office. And that is where I realized, what am I doing? I have to change that particular aspect. And then it took that another 20 years to come out with this. Thank you.
Right, sir. So if anybody would like to understand some of the true events as well as what's called the embellishments in the story, I would strongly advise you to pick up the book, Hour of the Hounds, and a personal advice is to pay special attention to the cover art. A lot of thought has gone into it, as sir was telling me sometime before. So, sir, moving on to another aspect of the book, I think one unusual and very unique choice that you made was to have a lot of literary references in the book. If I may call it that, there are a lot of literary Easter eggs that are just peppered throughout the narrative. And it's not necessarily what one expects in thrillers. One looks to a thriller generally to have a fast-moving plot and to just go from page to page and see what's happening. But there is a very visible influence of the literary movement, particularly of the romantic poets, in your novel. So what prompted that choice, sir?
That was that was a twister, Richard. That came as a surprise. That means you have really read, Richard really read through the book with the intensity with which it was written. I would go back to the last session. You know, an artist, the song when it came out was so intense. And that was literature combined with music, which came out. When we go to dance forms, we always say, I'm not a dancer myself, but whatever I read of it, that there are only 28 mudras or 13 mudras or 108 mudras. And these mudras are then combined together in various forms to come up with a particular sequence. The sequence may change. In fact, when we were kids in college, we used to say that everything which was worth written has already been written. You can only possibly twist it and present it in a slightly different manner. It is something like that. There have been great authors before us. There have been great writers before us. And when you are doing your English literature, when you are reading about them, some of them have left a lasting impact on you. You talked of the romantic poets. You know, Prakash, the protagonist in the book, is leading his life with a passion and intensity. And that is what attracts other people to him. Right. Passion, intensity, and the dominance of spirit, which is essentially the concept behind this book. That how can passion, intensity, and the dominant spirit overcome the odds which you may face, runs through the book, as you rightly said. And at times, I just felt that the authors who have come before me, particularly the poets, although there were prose also, I didn't use that one, but one of the lasting influences was, this in Gone with the Wind, Vivian Leigh says that unless you have lost your reputation, you never realize what a burden it was, or what freedom really is. Right 60 years after that, or 50 years after that, Chris Christopherson sang a song saying, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Now, two different authors saying that same thing in two different styles, but with the same intensity. Who am I to overcome or to change that masterpiece which has been only created? I think it's right way if I have to express a particular feeling, and Prakash has intense feelings. If you go through the book, Prakash's life is governed by certain principles which he has imbibed through his school, through his college, through his readings. And then he's trying to live them out. And when he's living them out at a point of crisis, or a point of when a relationship is at its inflection, he finds it easy, or I rather found it easy, to express it through some things which had already been said before, because they had been said so beautifully that I could not have anyway improved it. And just thought that the things which had really taken me across, probably lasted in memory for more than 50 years, others should also enjoy the same things which I had enjoyed with the same intensity with which I had enjoyed. That was the idea behind this. I hope it didn't stick out like a sore thumb, and it carried on the story as it was supposed to carry on and continued in that same mode.
Right. Absolutely. I think it was an unusual choice and a very fortunate one for the reader. And I believe it is said that all writers first and foremost have to be readers. So I'm sure that at least on that criterion you have done very well, sir. So another major theme of the book is that the narrative is pushed forward by these 6 diverse characters who slowly come together and work to accomplishing a common goal, even when their individual interests and individual necessities are not necessarily equally aligned with that goal. So it leads to a very interesting question of why people come together in that way. So I would like you, sir, to specifically maybe talk about that, but also talk about people coming together in general to achieve goals, whether it is in any field of life.
Thanks. Okay. So for the people, I think majority of the audience would not have read the book so far. It was basically on the western coast that it was based, and it has got 6 diverse characters. A young civil servant, who's the civil servant's kind of a mentor, who is his junior in the service, but who is a senior in the school. A girlfriend who comes from a royal background and still sticks around from a boy who has just come from a boys' school into the libertine atmosphere of Delhi University of the 80s. A police officer who's ready to break rules to achieve, quote unquote, I won't say a right thing, but objective. And 2 juniors who are ready to sacrifice their lives for the protagonist, that's Prakash. This question, in fact, has come up before, and that's again surprises me, because this came up because there was a discussion going on between one of the writers who was trying to adapt this book for the OTT. And he asked me a simple question, sir, how do you say, what is the motivation which brings these 6 people together? Because they're all from diverse backgrounds. And we kept on exploring this particular aspect. What brings people together? Is it their value system, which they have imbibed over the years from their childhood? And the value system with, again, quote-unquote, morality? Is it a loyalty which is bred out of a faith in each other? Is it a common objective which brings them together? Or is it really an inner feeling, what some may call inner compass? That inner compass which is not just limited to the values, but goes beyond the values into a deep-rooted culture which prevails in an organization, in individuals, or in the growth particular areas. In my book, I think, we have explored this relationships in depth, and whether it is, I don't know whether it lasted to be a thriller or not, but these 6 people, when they got together, they had one common objective. That is to bring down the biggest underworld don who was dominating the western coast in that particular era. But that was an objective. That objective does not bring diverse people together and then motivate them to break rules. There has to be something beyond. And I think that beyond is their faith in each other, that what we are aiming for is something which is right. That faith towards that belief towards right is something which brings them together. And I personally believe that when I was writing, somewhere back in the background was their original background which they came from. Like Kabir says, we are together because we cleared an exam together. Maybe yes. Somebody came up and said, no, we are together because they are loyalty. But then I think the key part which was there was stated by Shabnam somewhere in the end, where she says, I'm with Prakash because he lives his life with a passion, with an intensity, with a belief. He will fall, he will come back again. And when you die 1,000 deaths every day, and then you resurrect yourself, I think you have lived your life. I think all of them got together because they were trying to live life with a passion and intensity, which I think we all look for. That is what my take. I don't know what your take on that particularly will come from.
I think that's a very profound explanation of what brings people together.
I know, but whether it works in thriller, I don't know.
I think it does. I think it does.
Yeah, the intensity which you think of in a thriller, thriller is supposed to be a caper, but it's supposed to move from event to event. I did write a slightly different one where I tried to bring in a complex relationship into a thriller. It's for the reader to really judge whether it works or not works.
Right. In my opinion, it does, and I'm sure the definition of thriller is, to even some slight extent, being redefined. And I'm sure in your subsequent books, we'll see more and more of this theme being explored. Continuing that thread of Prakash, sir, so this character, the protagonist, is several times it's mentioned that he's inexperienced, he's a rookie, his seniors call him stubborn. One word that comes up very often is nincompoop. And yet he succeeds, and I think primarily because the right people want to help him at the right time, and there's something about him which makes people want to help him. So how did you conceptualize this kind of protagonist, sir, who is shown as very flawed, as heroic as he might believe himself to be? The narrative is very clear that he has his flaws and all of the things I mentioned, and yet somehow he manages, when it's really important, to capture help and assistance from the right people. So how has this come about?
Yeah, I think he was an anti-hero. I totally agree with you. Prakash is someone who is not really, who is just out of college, and he had certain very strong principles which he had imbibed in his college and school before that. And when you are, as an individual, as I told in the beginning, this story was conceived back in 2000. I was 10 years into the service then, and everything was an adventure for me. I was out there on the sea alone. I would go to a place and find that one of my officers working singly with the next point of where there was, we never used to get bread where we were posted. If you would get bread in a week, once in a week, that would be great. My officer was about 40 kilometers away from the next place where you could buy atta even, and that kind of a thing. They were all living alone, and they were all living, they were all out there in a belief that no, what we have been given a duty, we will do that duty. And for Prakash, it was an adventure. Instead of being this thing, it was an adventure because every time he stepped out, he felt, what am I doing? He said somewhere, he writes a letter to his girlfriend, you know, what I'm doing is something what James Bond does, except that I don't get the girls. And yes, I'm sticking to the old, and you don't get cigarettes also over there. Prakash became the anti-hero because he was lost. Most of us, in fact, for all its criticism and its faults, as a bureaucrat, I would say that the life which a young bureaucrat faces is one of the most challenging things which is ever experienced by an individual. Most of the bureaucrats who come out, they come out as youngsters straight out of college, and then thrust into a decision-making capacity which would affect a large number of people. When you look into that particular aspect, at time, either you can be very confident that and believe that I'm right. But I think any person who believes that he's always right is more of a fool than anybody else. So it is something you will have to, you need explore. And when you are exploring, you may turn indecisive. That is what happened with Prakash. Prakash, when he was trying to look into it, what am I supposed to do? He would run left, he would turn right, he would go straight, without knowing whether it was the right decision which he was taking at that particular point of time. He was lucky. Like most of us who will end our careers well, were lucky because you will have great mentors. And that is what happened with him. He had 5 people around him. Sorry, 3 people around him. So Prakash is often the weakling because he would postpone taking a decision. And that becomes the anti-hero of the thriller novel. Because the anti-hero, who is not supposed to be the hero in a thriller novel, is supposed to be running here, catching this guy, taking a decision, shoot somebody else, take him into this thing and emerge victorious. Prakash emerges victorious not because of his actions. Prakash probably emerges victorious because, as I said in the beginning, of his value systems. Those value systems brought people to him and and guided people and led people to tell him, okay, you are doing something or you're not doing something. But even if you're not doing something, if you do it this way, possibly you may succeed. You remember one of the lines in the beginning says, among the things which you have done, not done, and plan to do, lies something that lies the mistake which you have done, and which led to this particular conclusion. Now that's as confusing as what happens over here. As confusing because, yes, the things we do, the things we don't do. But finally, we have some great people who would form a team and leads you through that team may be ready to break rules, that teams may be able to guide you. My take is Prakash is the anti-hero with an absolutely great set of value system which draws people to him and leads them to help him out at every stage.
I hope all of us were...
I think that was the most confusing answer which I possibly came up with, but that is my book. When we started, I was talking to this thing, and most of the books which we come across. Sorry to interrupt, Richa, to continue on that particular aspect. I am a big fan of an author called Dick Francis. He's the guy who wrote about 30 mystery novels. And his characters fall down and come back again and again. Then they are beaten up. And he picks himself up and follows the track till the time the whole thing is unraveled. This is precisely what happens in the book, because for the people who have not read, Prakash is beaten at every stage. But he was lucky. Beaten at every stage by the antagonist. It's still a thriller. And it's only in the last 50 pages that he actually forms that team which brings the antagonist down. And that is where her question comes from. Why is Prakash failing again and again? The underdog coming back. Does he remain an underdog, or he really becomes the hero at all at any stage?
Yes, I think it's this very anti-hero nature of his that makes him a very appealing character. And even as the reader is progressing along the narrative and maybe seeing him make a decision that your feeling might not be best, he's going to pay for this later, you cannot help but always root for him. So in that way, a very, very good and believable protagonist. So just moving on to a more general aspect of the novel, sir. What do you think is the current scenario and the future of crime writing in India? Because I read a few articles a while ago that maybe crime writing has not succeeded as much here as it has in the West, where there's more of an established tradition. But also, I think that is changing. So what is your opinion on this?
Wow. Yes. No. Yes and no. I'll say yes, crime fiction or crime thriller or thriller genre as such. In India, it's the most challenging in English. You know, when we were young, we had Colonel Ranjit, Suren Monpathak, you guys you wouldn't have heard of, who were writing Hindi. And they were writing extremely good thrillers. Every railway station, every railway journey we would go on, we'll pick up a Colonel Ranjit or we'll pick up a Suren Monpathak. And then if you were probably from a literature background, you would pick up The Godfather. And but then came the OTT and also came the movies where a hero in a thriller, the thriller movie, where a hero would bash up 20 people at one go. His one smash would possibly overturn a car. And that is still the willing suspension of disbelief. People believe in that. But sometime, I think, last decade, Indian crime fiction, Indian thriller, various forms, psychological thriller, crime thriller, even the legal thriller, the financial thrillers, came of their age. We had authors who were writing, and I'm mainly talking of English, I'm not talking of the Hindi or the vernacular thrillers. There were writers who came up who would write about banking scams. There were writers who would come up, who wrote psychological thrillers. Something like I Hear You, which is a psychological thriller par excellence per se. There were writers who came up on who were writing about crime fiction, crime thrillers. But then a more interesting development, which I was asked of in one of the earlier Lit Fest which I participated is the new generation of bureaucrats coming up and writing crime thrillers. I'm not the first, I'm not the last on this. But in this particular one, what is happening is some of them are being adapted for OTT. These are, we have now even the established people who are writing based on facts. What I talked earlier as a non-fiction novel, which was based on certain events in the lives of certain people, certain officers, or even say, I'll take Hussain Jaidi, for example. Hussain Jaidi would take up a whole charge sheets and convert it into a novel. On a similar basis, he now moved on, he came out with his first novel, which is a fictional novel. The crime thrillers per se, I think, is picking up in a big way in India. The feeling of whatever be the two reasons, the two primary reasons we used to believe in for the thrillers, that is either the losing ourselves into the excitement or the catharsis feeling, either the two. In both the cases, the readers are picking up, except that we still have a challenge where the publisher normally asks you, yeah, I want a 65,000 word crime thriller. If you cross 65,000 words crime thriller, the publisher says nobody's going to read it. We are hoping, at least I am hoping, I write 90,000 word novels, and I don't believe to bring them down to 65,000 words. I do believe that the reader is getting discerning enough in India to pick up books which are more in the John Le Carre genre as much as in the Alistair MacLean genre which is running. So that's by this thing I think the Indian thriller has really picked up on the psychological front. On the psychological thrillers, we have really good writers at this stage. And the crime fiction is now picking up again in this particular decade.
Thank you, sir. I hope in the future we see Prakash maybe come to Shillong for one of his postings and see what he can do here. Although it's hard to imagine that such a city as pretty and vibrant as it is, especially today, can have a dark underbelly. But who knows what you can come up with.
I know, Richa. This thing is Northeast is with this extreme vibrance, extremely vibrant culture, extremely vibrant nature, the most challenging terrain, I think, which is there bordering 3 countries, has its own challenges and its own underworld, which can be the crime thriller, which can be explored. But I don't know how come so far nobody has come out writing on this particular aspect. Although in The Family Man, I believe the OTT thriller, well, the next one was coming to the Northeast, if I remember correctly.
I think due to the paucity of time, we'll have to wrap up our session. Maybe we can take one question. Anybody has one?
If there are any questions, perhaps we can ask one question, and
we can
for
take,
any additional questions,
we can take them outside.
They can be raised at the book signing.
So first of all, a big salute to you, because I'm a government employee myself, and I can truly relate to how you said that, initially someone told you that it looks like a note sheet. So we all get caught up in the mundane routine of affairs. So if you could give some tip to how, being in service as well, we can pursue writing, that would be really helpful, sir.
Yeah, writing has to be a passion. It is something which is I move in the circle of writers, and whereas Gulzar Sahab I met sometime in 1996, 97, and he just said a simple thing: if you believe you have a story to tell, get up at 4 in the morning, sit on your table by 4:30. There will be days where you will not produce even a page. But there will be days when you will produce 5 pages and you would come up so satisfied. Treat it as a job between 4:30 and 7:30 in the morning before you leave for the office. And that's your second job which is there. That's 3 hours. It takes you about half an hour, 45 minutes. In my case, at least, it took me, I don't know what about the others, half an hour, 45 minutes to simply blank out. Unless you blank out the office from your writing, you will never be able to take office out of your writing. And that 45 minutes, beyond that, it's a couple of hours you get. There are days when the creative juices really flow well. I have had days, 6-7 days, where I have not produced half a page. And then one day, suddenly, I'll produce 5, 6, 7 pages. I think you have to treat it as a second job, as a second passion. That's something which gets you on the table at 4:30 in the morning. That's the only thing I can suggest. That's my personal experience. Other authors may have a different experience on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And as mentioned, if there are any additional questions, they can be taken up at the book signing. But firstly, as a token of our appreciation, we would like to felicitate our speaker with a memento for the Shillong Literary Festival. And with that, we have come to the end of this session. It was truly insightful, sir, especially on what you were talking about on the aspects of crafting the world of creative nonfiction, especially for an author, as you mentioned, who came from a career that was inherently non-literary, but how you've been able to capture your experience over the years into the work that you've done. Thank you so much. May you have a pleasant literary festival ahead. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now delve into a fascinating session that traces the historical roots and modern transformations of Assam through the lens of its rich and complex past. Titled Writing Northeast India, a historical perspective on modern Assam, this session invites us to explore the intricate interplay of history, ecology, politics, and society that has shaped the region. We are joined by Dr. Arupjyoti Saikia, a renowned historian and professor at IIT Guwahati, with fellowships at Yale, Cambridge, and SOAS. His acclaimed works include Forests and Ecological History of Assam, A Century of Protests, and The Unquiet River. His research, honored with awards like The Shrikant Dutt Book Prize vividly narrates Assam's history, intertwining its environmental, political, and cultural legacies. In conversation with him is Dr. Kaustubh Kumar Deka, a doctoral candidate from Jawaharlal Nehru University, whose research focuses on the dynamics of student movements in Assam. With an extensive background in ethnographic fieldwork and policy analysis, he brings a nuanced perspective on the region's evolving identity. Together, they will unpack Assam's historical trajectory, offering insights into how its past informs its present and future. This promises to be an enlightening exploration of the unique place of Northeast in India's narrative. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Arup Jyoti Saikia and Dr. Kaustubh Kumar Deka to the stage. Gentlemen, I now leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your introductions, and a very good afternoon to all of you. So after some really interesting sessions on starting from folklore, some bit of music, and also the last session on thriller, now we are in a very interesting spot. And both of us, for sure, me, I don't know about Professor Khoikia, but we definitely feel like a bit of an outsider here, being two people from social science, because, you know, the whole domain that talks about literature is very interesting, that how history is placed here. After all, I remember here the famous saying by the American critic and writer Henry James, who said that it takes a great deal of history to produce a little bit of literature. So, I mean, those type of contexts, of course, there, and also we go by the iconic British historian E.H. Carr, who talks about history as the long struggle of men and a continuous dialogue of the past with the present. So I think this is the context that definitely calls for a very nuanced and rigorous engagement with history also in forums such as this, because history in our region especially, it has a special significance. It is the very premise on which our even literary imaginations and other forms of social imaginations are placed. So from that vantage point, I think it is a very absolutely apt guest that we have here, Professor Khoikia, whose work, some of which our presenters already discussed with you all. But his most recent book, which has, I think, come out about a year ago now, last year, August, it came out, that is The Quest for Modern Assam, a political history, which is being rightly hailed as a magisterial work, a comprehensive history, which has been praised by a lot by critics and also adored by readers alike. And in this comprehensive book, of which we will discuss more, Professor Khoikia takes us to a very, very long, comprehensive journey. But before we get into some of the details of the book, what I would like to ask you is that, I mean, since we are talking about so many different dimensions of understanding Northeast India also in today's previous discussions has thrown up many interesting dimensions, how do we place our sense of history in this larger context? Because as we know, Northeast India as a category, either of imagination or policy making or as a lived reality, is an outcome of a contentious history. It comes through a lot of disruptions as well as a lot of assertions. In your book, the first chapter, that is, if I remember, An Empire in Disarray. So you definitely take it as a very interesting point of departure, perhaps. So how do you inaugurate, or how do you get into this journey as a historian, as someone who wants to bring historiography into this understanding?
Right. First, let me acknowledge my gratitude to the organizers, because to be a historian and amidst the literary people, it is not an easy job. And thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Kostov, for framing those questions. I think while we study this region, it is really a difficult task. What kind of history we will write, for whom we would be writing, and what should be the point of departure. And I'm sure the students in Meghalaya, or students in Nagaland, or in Mizoram, or Manipur, or Tripura, or say in Arunachal, or in Assam, everybody would look forward to think of a different kind of lineage and different kind of trajectory. Most of our historical writings are largely dominated by the political discourse, right? We largely tend to think about the political developments that had taken place probably in the last few decades or probably in the last few centuries, right? My take is, my preference would be always over a long time period. I like to be at the august company of the geologist, for instance, who like to think about long time, maybe 1,000 years, or maybe more longer. And it is not an easy job to visualize probably what my forefathers say some 1,000 years before, how they were thinking, how they were negotiating, probably a cold wintry night, in the absence of light, in the absence of all kinds of modern technologies, and how they were progressing and thinking and making life, right? To visualize the history of these regions or where we were located, history is obviously about the past, right? It is truly a difficult task. The kind of history that we will write, for whom we would be writing. And personally, I feel that historians must learn the art of a novelist or a short storyteller. Because we must write to a reader, wider reader, and try to comprehend and visualize that situations. Say 1,000 years before, or say 500 years before. What kind of, for example, plants were here? What kind of timbers were here? What kind of monsoon patterns were here? Right? These questions need answer, and to visualize them, it is truly a difficult task. The history writing for the northeastern India are not yet well informed in that directions. We largely talk about the political developments of the last, say, 50 years or last 70 years, 80 years. This is what we largely think about. But those political developments do come and do go away. The serious imprints of, say, the long economic developments, or say the larger environmental developments, which will have serious impact on this region's economy, polity, and the future, these are hardly talked about. The classic examples would be that of the earthquakes. The greatest earthquake that this region has produced, or say this region had suffered, is that of the 1897 earthquake, where this particular location where we are sitting now, it underwent dramatic transformations. But these are largely aesthetical transformations that that earthquake of 1897 had produced. But that earthquake of 1897, probably few other earthquakes, which are probably gigantic earthquakes, which had tormented the earth, tormented the mountains, tormented the rivers, tormented the non-humans, they needed to be understood. And this requires a long and comprehensive understanding. I'll summarize my answer. Our historical understanding of these regions would be successful in two ways. If we take a larger geographical framework, it would be unwise to study only Brahmaputra Valley or even say the plateau of Meghalaya. We need to bring everything combined. We need to see that this region is located between Bay of Bengal and the rising Himalayas or the Patkais into the east. That time period needs to be considered seriously, and we need to talk to many kind of archives. It cannot be one set of archive. It cannot be mere folklore. It cannot be mere colonial archive. It has to be a comprehensive archive. Probably we'll be able to tell a larger story, and this requires institutional, individual, and societal engagement. And everybody has to come together to think about that. This is how I would like to locate my region's history.
Let me take you up on the point, 2 points particularly. One about that how history is a kind of a craft of storytelling, right? I mean, on that point, you also mentioned about different types of archive. What I would like to know more from you is that this issue of, the trans-border nature or the spatiality, which is very fluid, which used to be very fluid. In your work, perhaps you talk about colonialism and the transformative experience of the two great wars, especially the Second World War, as acts of disruptions or point of disruption. Now, how do we recover those kind of, lost aspects? One indication in your book, which is, of course, a very voluminous book, which runs into almost 900 pages, out of which about maybe 200 to 300 of them are only different references and sources, archival sources that you mentioned. Can you tell us more about the different explorations of archives that we see that can address that issue of, that aspect of transboundary aspects? Because if I remember right, it was the historian Sugata Bose who said a very interesting thing in another context, that the most of the frontiers that colonialism talked about is in fact no frontier at all. They were very heart of many continuums. They were in fact highways, the highways which were transformed into frontiers through the violent experience of colonialism. So how do we get back to those, the sense of connectivity and those, those arterial notions that we had? So what type of archives will help us in that?
I would like to give my answers in two parts. First, the kind of archives that this region's historians or academicians should engage with, and the kind of connections. I begin with the connections. The most fitting example would be the living breeze from Meghalaya, the rubber, Ficus elastica. I'm sure many of us are familiar with the story of Ficus elastica or the living breeze. The gum or the resin that the Ficus elastica produced, it was hugely in demand in England, in other Western European economies since the mid-19th century, the gum and the resin. It was increasingly used in the increasingly expansive automobile industry, especially in London, from 1860. So right from the 1820s onward, 1830s, the Ficus elastica gum, which was found largely in the Khasi Hills, Patkais, and the modern Arunachal Pradesh, this gum was collected by the local people and it was made into a commodity. It was sold to merchants in the mid-19th century, especially the Marwari merchants who would collect till